Dene people in the homeland of the Métis Nation. The hydroelectricity powering my computer is generated in northern Manitoba, which is Treaty 5 territory. The water that sustains us here in Winnipeg comes from Treaty 3 territory, and we have Shoal Lake 40 First Nation to thank and acknowledge their struggles for Freedom Road and to have safe drinking water access to their community. As treaty people, we acknowledge the damage of the past and present and commit to working in a meaningful partnership with First Nations, Métis, and Inuit peoples. The Manitoba Partnership, which builds partnerships and capacity with First Nations on community-led initiatives, is the sponsor of today's workshop. The partnership also works in these treaty areas and benefits from these resources. Please write in the chat, take a moment now to write the territory you are zooming in from and the territory that is the source of your water, if your living area. Please let me introduce Stewart Hill. Stewart Hill is an Ininiw and PhD candidate at the Natural Resources Institute of the University of Manitoba. And he holds a Master's of Natural Resources Management and Bachelor of Science, Environmental Science degree. He is currently a senior researcher and policy analysis at Manitoba Keewatinowi Okimakanak, or known as MKO, or the Manitoba Northern Chiefs organization. He has 30 years of experience in natural resource land and land management. He was born and raised in northern Manitoba in Manitou Sakahigan, or God's Lake First Nation, and speaks Ininiw or Cree language fluently. His PhD dissertation researches and asserts governance over land and water in the traditional territory of his home community of Manitou Sakahigan. And growing up there without drinking water, his parents never having piped water, and he really speaks from a special place of experience about the issues of drinking water and the sacredness of water. So I will take this moment to say I have offered tobacco and I've agreed to provide it in the river, to go down to the river and spread tobacco to show my respect and appreciation for Stewart talking today. Okay, Stewart? If we can have Stewart's slides, we will begin.
Okay, while they're doing that, I'll acknowledge everybody that's here to listen. Basically, when you say I think it goes beyond a simple thank you. I think it means I greet you in blessing. That's what it means to me. It's beyond a simple thank you. And it has a great meaning in our Cree language. And those words are sacred, very sacred. So the slides should be coming on pretty soon. I'll be speaking from a lot of slides. So sometimes I'll spend some time on some slides that are significant and very relevant to my talk. And if stories come up during my presentation, or that are triggered by one of my slides, I'll kind of digress a bit and then tell you a story. Basically, I have about 30 minutes to 40 minutes to do my talk, and then we'll open it up for questions and discussion. The premise of my argument is that our power as Ininiw people comes from the Creator. It does not come from the Constitution of Canada. It does not come from the government of Canada. We have that power when we're born into this world. That's what they mean by inherent right. inherent power. So that's the premise of my argument. And that when we signed the treaties, in our case, when we signed the treaties, ours was signed in 1909, August 6, 1909. That's when Commissioner Simmons came into our territory. And one of the probably the most simple and direct questions that's been asked by one of my committee members is, how did we lose control as Ininiw people, as self-governing Ininiw people? At what point in our history did we lose control? Because before the coming of the Europeans, we were in full control. How did it get to be so that we have no control over our lands and our waters and our territories, even though we have that inherent right to determine our own destinies and to govern our own lives and our own affairs? So that's the question. And the title of my dissertation is The Autoethnography of an Ininiw from Goss Lake, Manitoba, Canada. First Nation water governance flows from sacred Indigenous relationships, responsibilities, and rights to aski. Aski is the earth. Encompasses everything. That's our holistic Indigenous worldview. Everything from water, land, animals, fish, insects, the soil, everything. It's contained in that one word, aski. And part of that relationship I talk about is what I just said. That responsibility has been given to us by the Creator to take care of the earth. And our people knew this long before the coming of the Europeans into this continent. Our people knew this. We had our teachings, we had our values. But if you are a Christian and you know the Bible somewhat, or you study the Bible, some of those same teachings are in the Bible, including the one here, having responsibilities to the earth. It's in the Bible. And that the creation was made for our survival. And anyway, Goss Lake, if you look at the map in front of you, Goss Lake is in northeastern Manitoba. It's close to the Manitoba-Ontario border. It's usually described as 60 miles long, 20 miles wide. It's a pristine lake. There's been no development on it except in the 1930s to early 1940s. There was a dam built at the south end of Goss Lake to power a gold mine for about 10 to 15 years. And then that was during, and I think that was the onset of World War II, and then that's when they abandoned the mine. Okay, next slide. Now, if you look at Goss Lake, Goss Lake is located right there, right at the Narrows. That's why it's called Goss Lake Narrows. And the lake, but the trapline block that we've been assigned to, that was established in the 1940s, early 1940s, that's roughly our territory, but it overlaps with Shamattawa to the northeast, Oxford House to the west, and then Island Lake to the south. We have overlaps in use, but we also go into Ontario here. This area is called Wassuckton in our language, and I'll show you a map later on where it shows that area into Ontario. Okay, next slide. So here we have a Google shot of the community of Goss Lake Narrows. It's roughly maybe around 1,300 people on reserve, but with off reserve, it's about 2,500 or so members. And this is the community that I grew up in. The lake itself, I've traveled that whole lake, and I know that whole lake Okay, next slide. Next slide. Oh, okay. Okay, I'm gonna point out the areas of Goss Lake Narrows. We'll start on the west side. West side is called Kwesksibanik. And what that word means is the narrows on the other side. That's what it means in Cree. And the island is where the airport is located. It's actually Crown land, and it's actually that's where the Métis community and the non-Aboriginal people reside. And then on the other side of the bridge here, we have a bridge here now. We have the Narrows, we just call that CP. And then towards this green area here, we have we call Pisquatsinati, Chuck's Point. And then this area here, we just call the school area because that's always been where the school is located. Going on here into the central area, we have Kiskapska and what we just call the CMHC area. And here we have Waza. That's the this is the beginning of the community. This is where the beginning of the community was located, at this area here. And then we have another area called Sabwaza. Sabwaza means the bay, like they're describing this bay here. And then on the north side, this is where I grew up. It's Nazi's Point, named after the family, Nazi's Point. And but in Cree we call it Sagado. Or as you come around the corner here, you see the community area. So those are the areas that we have in our community. Okay, keep going. Next slide. Okay, for my dissertation, there was a quote by Senator Murray Sinclair that inspired me to go in the direction of governance as opposed to ownership of land and ownership of resources. Ownership of land and resources is a foreign concept in our culture because those belong to the creator. That's from our worldview. We cannot own land, we cannot own resources, and we can't tell anybody where they can and cannot go. So different from the European system. But the angle of governance was inspired by this quote by Senator Murray Sinclair. The question of access to resources, the question of access to land, question of governance, the government's overland is really the key. I always tell people, that we shouldn't think about ownership of land as the key. We should think of governance over land as the key. That's that quote there that inspired me. We should think of governance over land as the key, and that takes it to a different kind of conversation. See, we're not battling for ownership of land. All we're saying is recognize our jurisdiction, recognize our right to self-government, recognize our governance power over our lands and waters. And I was from an interview with CBC Indigenous on March 25th, 2018. That's when that quote was from. Okay, next slide. Okay, my thesis statement for my dissertation is a thesis and the research question. Thesis statement: Goss Lake First Nation always retained its governance over water. There's a high unlikely, it's very unlikely that they talked about governance over water when they signed that treaty, And my research question is, how does Goss Lake First Nation retain its governance over the water to this day? So that's the autoethnography method that I use, where I draw upon my own experiences. Autoethnography is actually three processes in one word. Auto meaning your life experiences, your autobiography, your ethno being the cultural perspective and how that fits into the bigger society. And then of course the Griffey is the writing and the analysis and the expression of that analysis. Okay, next question. Next slide. So my objectives are to combine the autoethnographic method and the circular frame of Indigenous thought process to articulate and document the governance of water by the Goss Lake First Nation, based on my personal experience living as a Goss Lake First Nation member and also an environmental policy analyst for Manitoba's Ininiw. Describe and interpret the history of water systems in Goss Lake First Nation and its connection to First Nation water governance and policy, and articulate the Ininiw worldview and existing uses of water, lands, and other resources within Goss Lake Register Trapline Block to demonstrate governance over water. So basically, that's the whole thing that I'm trying to show. First of all, that there is a cultural connection to our lands and our waters, and I can demonstrate that through my own personal life, my own personal experiences, and my own personal knowledge and training. And also that we all have a similar history. As First Nations people, we all have a similar history because we're governed by the same legislative tools and mechanisms. And also our worldview, like if we're gonna assert governance over our lands and waters, then we have to tell people, this is how we view the world. This is how we view our lands, our waters. They have to understand that. Our views have been discounted for over hundreds of years. Since the coming of the Europeans, they've been interpreting everything, telling us what to do, telling us we're owned by them, that we're lower than. But that's not the case. What we're saying is, you have to listen to us. You have to give us what's rightfully ours under natural law, the law of the Manitou, the creator. So next slide. So our water system in the community, we have one mainland water treatment plant that services quite a number of households, but they're not all connected to the water system, pipe water system. And also we have one on the west side, and I showed you the west side community. It's separated by a causeway. And this one is smaller because that area is smaller. But we also use cisterns. That's what that hose is. I'll show you what the use of cisterns. If we could go next slide. Okay, here's the water delivery truck. That one is filling up at the mainland treatment plant. And I believe this was January 2015 that I visited the community, and I spent the whole day riding around in this truck delivering water to all the cisterns in the community. The statistics from Health Canada show that over 70%, about 74% of our water system is use cisterns, which are stored. Those that don't know what cisterns are, those are water holding tanks and sewage holding tanks for each of the houses. I know about 74% of those are of our houses use either cisterns, or they still use buckets or tubs or barrels to store their water, and they still use the honey buckets. Can you imagine that in this day and age, 2020? That's still going on reservations. So cisterns, as you can see here, I took some pictures of it. The one on the left, you'll see some debris in the water in the cisterns, and on the top side of that picture, you'll see a heater. That's what they do. They plug in a heater so the water doesn't freeze during the winter. And the hose on the picture on the right, you have the hose delivering water or provide sourcing the water to the cisterns. And usually they encase them in plywood structures. Okay, next slide. And here we have a house with the cistern right in the crawl space of the house. And they have a pipe running outside where the hose goes in, and then they fill up the water with it. And I actually crawled under the house to go take a picture, see how accessible it is, or how almost impossible to access that cistern, let alone clean it. We could barely get into it. But anyway, I crawled down there and I took a picture of that on the right. You can see how small the space is. Okay, next slide. And water system deficiencies at Goss Lake, they are very substantial. Probably the only thumbs up is in the whole system is the emergency provisions for water. Like they will come in and they'll install the water treatment plant, but the whole infrastructure for the community is lacking, such as maintenance, service repairs, limited capacity, like in terms of maintaining those cisterns and the water system. The water truck are expensive, like they break down and then they're costly to repair. Household utility, hydro, they're high cost. Administration dollars in terms of the administration of the water services and the capital projects. That's like for maintenance of the capital projects. And I learned also through this dissertation is that the government only pays 80%, and on top of that they charge user fees. So that's a very significant strain on the budgets of First Nations. It requires professional trades. Again, that's dollars. Water tank cleaning, those need to be done at least, I think it's like once or twice a year. But that does not happen. And there's an inadequate monitoring of gauges, monitoring and gauges to be modernized. So in every area, there's there's a thumbs down. Okay, next slide. So now I'm going to go into the dissertation. These are my theoretical framework, the conceptual framework, and my timeline. The medicine wheel is what I used for my theoretical framework. And basically what the medicine wheel is it's a description of how we relate to the earth. We have the directions, east, south, west, north. To the east, we have the spiritual. To the south, we have the physical. And to the west, we have the emotional. And then to the north, we have the mental. The east, the spiritual, is, I guess, correlated with when a baby born into this world, they have a spirit. So that's the spiritual aspect. And then when you become a child, you go into this rapid growth, rapid physical growth. And then as you become an adult, you start to master and be more aware of the complexities of your emotions. And then as you go from adulthood into elderhood, that's the north, that's the mental, and you become more aware and you acquire more wisdom as an elder, and you know the ways of the world. So that's the theoretical framework that I used. And I hired a graphic designer to draw this out on the computer. Okay, next slide. So this is what the graphic designer came up with. You still have all those components, spiritual, physical, emotional, and mental. And this is what I use. This is what I use for my my thesis and my dissertation. Okay, next slide. For my conceptual framework, this is how I thought of the whole process of and how I analyze the results of all my research. And this comes from Wampati Wakota. He's a Dakota elder. That's at the Indigenous Student Center at the University of Manitoba. And his teaching says that when we think of something, or we have a problem, or we want to deal with something, we follow a process of heart, mind, body, and spirit. Heart is we feel an emotion. And then we think about that emotion, mind. And then we act on it, the body, with our bodies. And then that whole process becomes the collective experience of our spirit. That's what's within us. That's how we're made up. We have a spirit, we have a body, and we have a heart, our emotions, and we have a mind, our mental capacity. So that's the medicinal teachings, and this is actually a very good teaching because this is how we function as human beings. Everybody functions like this. There's no exceptions. This is how we all function. This is our motor. This is how we get our drive from heart, mind, body, spirit in that order. So that comes from a Dakota elder. Okay, next slide. And then a timeline, like we thought about it, and it's in geologic time. That's the age of the earth and all the processes that have gone through the earth, all the processes that it's gone through, all the geological processes. And then we have in North America here, we have the Gregorian calendar being imposed as opposed to the moons. In our ancient system, we had 13 moons, but the Gregorian calendar gives us 12 months, 12 moons. So we adopted that Gregorian calendar. And then we move into colonial impacts, and that's the present. That's what we're living in, the colonial impacts, the colonial process. And I'm sure you can fill in the blanks there of what that entails. And I'll talk about that more towards the end. And where we're trying to go as peoples, as Innu people, is we want a good life. Everybody deserves a good life, not a life of dependency. This is the future. We're moving towards that. That is our responsibility to the coming generations, to my children, to my grandchildren, that they achieve this, that they are able to achieve Minuk-Matsun, the good life that everybody deserves. It does not matter if you're human, you deserve a good life. So, and then in each of the quadrants we have, through geologic time, we have natural law. And then we have the Gregorian calendar. In history, we have colonialism. And right now we talk about reconciliation. How do we come to terms with each other and our cultures and where we've been in our journeys together. And then of course we have the restoration of natural law. That's what we're trying to do. Natural law says that Creator gave us a responsibility over the earth and to be able to live off the resources of the land and the resources through our own sweat and our own efforts. That's in the Bible, it's in Genesis. But our people knew this long, long before the coming of the white man to North America, before the European settlers got here. Our people knew this already. They're like, we weren't just sitting here waiting to be saved. As we've been depicted. Saved, and I always ask myself, saved from what? We didn't even know there were other cultures. It was just us here. This is our piece of land. This is our piece of earth in God's lake. That's the piece of earth that's been given to us by the Creator, where we can live. If you strip everything away, and we're the only ones left there, you know, that's that is our piece of land. That is our piece of earth, you know, and you know, the majority of the people that impose things on us, where's your piece of earth? Somewhere across the ocean, across the Atlantic Ocean. That's where your piece of earth is. My piece of earth is in Goss Lake. So this is what this depicts. Okay, next slide. And if we put that as a linear representation, that timeline, first we have, of course, the geological time, and then we have the Gregorian calendar. The geologic calendar is, of course, pretty self-explanatory. The last, in Goss Lake area, the last glacier, I looked at the map, the last glacier receded out of Goss Lake probably about 8,000 years ago. And then you had the Lake Agassiz that covered the whole from northern Manitoba right into the Dakotas, right into Alberta and into the Great Lakes. That's how massive that glacier lake was. And these glaciers would have been about at least 2 miles high when they're melting northward. That's the last ice age. And we have a legend about that. And then it's the flood legend regarding involving the muskrat, or the Wisagecha, our trickster in our legends, sends down a muskrat. First of all, he's floating in the flood. There's more to this, but I don't have time to tell you the legend. But anyway, he sends down a muskrat to try and get that piece of earth that he hit at the bottom of the lake, which would have been Lake Agassiz. And the muskrat is successful, and he brings up that piece of earth, and that's that earth that Wisagecha used to recreate the land. And the significance of that is that it's a record for us as Ininiw people. It's a record of a time when the earth cleansed itself. There's a series of events where the earth cleansed itself. First was by fire. Those were the volcanoes, and that's when the continents were formed. The ones that we know now: North America, South America, Africa, Europe. You know, those continents. That's when they were formed. The volcanoes by fire, right? Volcanoes. The next was the ice ages, the cleansing by ice, and there's legends associated with these events. And then by water, the earth was cleansed by water, and that's that muskrat story I just told you. And if you ever watch that movie that by Al Gore, that documentary, it's called An Inconvenient Truth. He talks about this. So our legends record already what Al Gore's talking about. And then there's a prophecy that's involved with this. They say that if we do not uphold our responsibility to take care of the earth, the next cleansing is going to be by air. And that could be this virus that we're dealing with right now. You know, it's airborne, right? It's transmitted by droplets, by aerosol. So that prophecy says that the next cleansing of the earth is going to be by air. That could be this pandemic that we're dealing with, this virus. And then there's going to be other events coming. And that could be climate change, global warming, and all the disasters that are going to be associated with that. Earthquakes, landslides, mudslides. It's going to be all of that are going to be coming. But we have a responsibility to try and continue to take care of the earth. And we have that responsibility, and we have to take care of the earth. And I think that's a very important point. So I'll just go through the linear thing quickly. And then we had in 1874, we had or 1867, we had the first passage of the Constitution of Canada. And they included us in section 9124 of that Constitution. Indians and lands reserved for Indians. Basically, what they did there is they took it upon themselves to govern us without our knowledge and our permission. And they put us as wards of the state. They made us dependent upon them. And we see that right now in terms of how reservations or reserves are administered. And then they passed a law, the Indian Act in 1874, putting all kinds of restrictions on that law. And that law continues to govern us today, including that Constitution Act 1874. So these are not just historic things that happened. They're alive today. As I speak now, I'm governed by the Indian Act. From cradle to grave, they say. And then in 1909, for God's sake, we signed our treaty. The Commissioner Simmons came, and then they came ashore, shook the hands of the people, and said, the Queen is going to take care of you. The Crown is going to take care of you. And you know, they talk about that. I can go more into that, but in consideration of time, I'll just keep going. 1930s, the federal government transfers natural resources to the provinces. The Natural Resources Transfer Act of 1930, without our knowledge and without agreement from their treaty partners. And then late 1930s, about late 1930s, we have our reserves are established at God's Lake Narrows. So 1935 to early 1940s, we have the Island Lake gold mine happening. Again, we have no benefits from that except to maybe provide wood and some employment, but no profits from it. 1950s, we have a combination of commercial fishing and the traditional economy, hunting, fishing, and trapping. And then in the 1960s are a very significant era because that's the rising of our people. That's when we start to assert ourselves, or assert our rights. And then you start to see the court cases and that. I'm just adjusting my screen here. 1970s, we have a combination, still the combination of commercial fishing, trapping, and traditional harvesting economy. We have the coming of the first electrification projects in the mid 1970s. I remember that time. I was living in as a boy in God's River at the time, and I remember the men putting up the poles. And before that, we were using candles, kerosene lamps, and other lighting devices. And then in the 1980s, commercial fishing is shut down in God's Lake. In the early 1980s, we have the Hudson's Bay Company leaves the community of God's Lake. And then the 1982, we have the repatriation of the Constitution Act. And that's where Section 35 rights that we enjoy today. It's in that Constitution. And then in the 1990s, about late 1990s, we have the first piped water being installed into God's Lake Narrows. Before that, we were hauling water for our water needs from down the bank. And then in the 2000s, some piping water system, and then they start installing the cisterns. And then, of course, there's a significant event that I took part in 2000, that was started in 2002, but I went on it on 2017. It's a paddle from God's Lake to Norrie House. It's estimated about 200 to 250 kilometers through the wilderness. And it's a healing journey. And I took part in that in 2017 as part of my dissertation research. And then we have the present. And then the future. The future is a significant consideration. If we keep going the way we are, and we keep the dependent system, we're going to keep going downhill. We're going to keep going deteriorating. in our well-being. Where we're trying to go is we're trying to reestablish our governance. And this is only a small part of it. My dissertation is only small. I'm talking about water and governing over water. But in the overall scheme of things, self-government, that is where we need to go. We need to determine our own destiny and establish our own governance structures. Okay, next slide. Okay, I'm going to show you some traditional land uses, sacred sites, global positioning system mapping, and the Canoe Quest 2017. Okay, next slide. I'll start to speed up a bit. This map is based on only 13 interviews, map biography interviews that me and the coordinator there, Keith Piscanas, and one time I was helped by Roger Mason as well. We went and interviewed the people and the elders and the hunters and fishermen and trappers. And we recorded burial sites, cabins, campsites, old community gathering sites, spiritual sites, berry picking sites, fishing, hunting, medicinal plants, timber, youth training areas. All of that is included in this, and it corresponds with the basically with the trap line block that I showed you earlier. It actually corresponds to it, except here. You see this yellow line into Ontario? Right here. It actually goes into Ontario. This area is called Wasatton. Okay, next slide. What we also did in Goss Lake is we spent a couple of days with the elders, and they showed us all the special and sacred sites that we have in our territory, such as old settlements, place of legends, graves, seasonal rounds, settlement sites, Spirit Islands. Spirit Islands is a very significant site because that's how Goss Lake got its name. Fish weirs, settlement areas, commercial fishing, special areas, and graves. So all of that is contained in these. These were told to us by the elders. They told us that this, but they made a note. They said, this is only what we know. What happened in the past, like maybe thousands of years they're talking about. They said that, you need to do further investigations. And they also said that all this land, this whole area is sacred. All land is sacred. Okay, next slide. Okay, and part of this mapping, what we did is we showed a video from a film from 1957 about Goss Lake, and we showed it to the elders. And this is what they're watching here with the camera. I mean, with the site. And these are some of the elders. These three elders are now gone. They passed on. This elder with the red sweater is still with us. He's living at the elderly person's home. So they're the source of knowledge. Okay, next slide. What we also did was we went on a boat and we spent about a day and a half. On a half day, we went under the South Basin and we recorded burial sites, cabins, campsites, landmarks, old community gathering sites. We went that first day, we went half day, we went. And then the second day, we went all this way and we marked with a GPS, global positioning system, and we took pictures and we stopped at every site, very significant. And we recorded 72 sites. Okay, now the Canoe Quest, that was in 2017 that I went on it. Very, very exhilarating experience for me. And my late dad and many of the men made this trek many, many times. They were freighting for the Hudson's Bay Company. One of the significant things I'll mention about this route, there's 11 portages. Some of them pretty short, but two of them are pretty long. One of them that are long is at Robinson Port, it's about a mile long. But anyway, on the way there, about halfway, we were told that this is going to be your last swim, because we were swimming. And they said, we were told, this is going to be your last swim because the water from here on in is going to get bad. And the reason for that water is the hydroelectric development that's happening here on the Nelson River. And it backs water up through this system. And you could see it. And then by the time we got here into Norway House, I'll tell you a story about how bad the water is in Norway House. We were washing the tubs, the storage tubs in the barrels that we carry our food and our supplies in. And I went down the bank from that house that we were staying in. I went down the bank. I said, well, because we didn't have water. That house had cisterns and was out of water. And I said, well, why don't we go down the bank and we use that water? I went down the bank. It was full of debris and mud. That's how bad the water is from hydroelectric development at Norway House. It's we couldn't even use that water to clean our barrels, so we had to wait for the water delivery. And this picture here, I thought I'd throw them in. This is all the canoe questers. The evening after this day, the next day, that evening, that's when we would hit Norway House. They're all pointing west. Next slide. And I threw in this picture just to prove, I guess, that I was on the quest. You know, that's me right there. And next to me there is the leader, Samantha. And that guy here is Timothy. Sadly, he's passed on now. He had a medical condition and he's no longer with us. But it was an honor to have paddled with him. Okay, next slide. So I'm going to show you some historical photos of our socioeconomic life in the history of Goss Lake. I mentioned commercial fishing. Here's some historical photos from the 50s. Yeah, I believe this is late 50s. And then okay, next one. And then our spiritual and religious life. There's people going to church. This is the old United Church. And then living on the land. These are pictures of those. And then freighting by tractor trail and by canoe. Okay. Okay, and this is by travel. They used to use dog teams, and of course they paddled by canoe. Okay, I'll go through these. And then we have seasonal employment and sport fish tourism. I did this as a young man. I did this. I guided. Okay. And then these are some of that from our GPS expedition. These are graves at Wasatchwan, the old settlement site. It's not far from the main site. Okay, I'm going to go through this really quickly. It's a water model under self-government, what I think our water model should look like. And where that flows from, our governance over our water comes from our relationship to the Creator. In the first quadrant, we have Manitou creates and grants life. And water, Nipi as a creation is sacred. In the next quadrant, we have a responsibility to take care of the water. That's our sacred responsibility. And then we have water as part of creation enables the maintenance of aski and creation. That's our stewardship of our water. And then we have water enables the health and well-being. There's a connection between water and the health of the people. And at the east, we have the spiritual world, and then we have the physical world, and then we have the ecosystem world, and then we have the human world. And they're all interconnected. Okay, so that's where that flows from, that right, that creator-given right, that governance power over water comes from that. And if we were to, let's say, develop our own system, we would have four elements of it, according to the using that circular frame of the medicine wheel. First would be planning, or unashkion. Second would be the community water system. That's my closest word for that water system in the community. And then of course we got aski. That's what we call the land, the traditional territory. Aski, the traditional territory. And then of course we would tie it in, we would ingrain everything into our governance, administration, laws, policies, and our capacity development, or Ininiw of GLFN. Like that's how we would function. And if we cut that circular frame in half, the above is water governance, and then below it is the source water and distribution. So that's the model that I've proposed from all my research. This is how I think it should function. One of the things I'll say quickly is that someone might say, you know, like, well, this can be done under colonialism or under Canada. Very, very difficult because it's all proposal driven. It's all programs and services. Under this, we would devote the time, the capacity, and all the things that are needed to accomplish this under self-government. Okay. Next slide. Okay, this one is the link between cultural genocide and Indigenous peoples and water governance. All this I've described already. This is our history, and we've been declining since the time of contact and our position of sovereignty. We've been declining to the present day, where we have continuous erosion of our rights and our identity and our history and our culture. And where we're trying to go, if we continue to follow in the path we're in right now and in that dependency state, then we're going to continue to decline. But where we're trying to go is we're trying to go and, you know, have take control of our affairs, take control of our rights. And then, you know, part of that is going to be holding Canada accountable for all of this that has happened. Canada needs to be held accountable for that. And then we have to develop First Nations governance. How will it look like? I propose one model here. The last slide, I propose one model for water, and also, but we're striving to go into that same level of sovereignty that we had at the time of contact, but in a modern world. Okay, so in consideration for time, I'll just keep going. So I'll just slow down a bit here, but these are my conclusions. I'm just basically going to read them off and comment a bit on them. The people of Goss Lake First Nation for thousands of years kept the land and water quality of water in a pristine state through sophisticated governance of land and water before colonialism. That has never been acknowledged by anybody in government or Canada. We stewarded over that and took care of the land for thousands of years before the coming of the Europeans. And then by applying the wards of the state status to Indigenous people in the first Constitution of 1867 and the subsequent treaty and provinces in the Adhesion Treaty 5/1909, the deficient water system is the product of racist government practices, policies. That's they were geared towards that notion that we are dependent and under their government, when in actual fact the treaties say we are government to government, nation to nation. Yet that's not how our place in Canada is right now, and that has a big detrimental effect upon our water, our lack of water systems. Okay, next one. Cisterns and barrels for water storage must be discontinued and replaced due to the high health risk imposed and high service costs, and maintained to be replaced by piped water and sewage to all areas of Goss Lake First Nation. Every house in Goss Lake should have piped water, not cisterns, not barrels. They should have they should have running water because, you know, that's the fiduciary obligation of the government. New laws in Canada must enshrine safe water and water quality on a high priority basis as an interim step to the governance over water and land by the Goss Lake First Nation. We need to take control of our water. We need to take control of the governance and the management of water, both at the community level and in our territory. Okay, there's no separation between our community and our territory. It's all whole. And that's how we think about it. Replace the circuit-wide training program with Indigenous community-led governance supported and not-for-profit First Nation technical services. And that's that model that I just showed you. Run with Goss Lake First Nation and other First Nations with a board of directors. So we would ingrain it and entrench it right into our governance system. Okay. Male dominance in the current cistern installation of key water delivery and water treatment systems are the opposite of the Indigenous system, which had women's roles in protecting and managing water. This gendered power dynamic to water disempowers women. Their imbalance of power over water causes women to lose control over the ability to care for themselves and their families, as water is required to feed children and the family-based children, provide drinking water for the family, and self-care. Restoring women's role in the caring, governance, and management of water is required. And this is recognized at the UN level as well, this the role of women in water management. Okay. Water needs to be under the public health portfolio to show the central role of water in health. Since health is at the center of the medicine wheel, a holistic health program is needed to connect water with health and provide resources and capacity. Connecting water and health requires regular water testing, comprehensive water safety and sustainability plans, and prevention of waterborne diseases through vaccines in the meantime. A sustainable and safe water plan to ensure the quality and quantity of drinking water will save money by ensuring health instead of years of chronic and acute sicknesses. By aligning water with health savings will accrue as safe water will reduce health expenses for chronic and acute care. There's a connection between water, the health of water, and the health of people. And what the government needs to realize is disinvestment in water now, or the enabling of First Nations to take control of their water, will have long-term benefits right into the future. Okay. The spiritual understanding that water is life, a life force. I call it a life force. The sacred nature of water needs to be the key central guiding principles of a Goss Lake First Nation water government. Ininiw have an intimate sacred experience in water every day or many times during the day. Each day, washing and drinking water provides Ininiw a spiritual and health connection. The sacred nature of water must be recognized and implemented under a Goss Lake First Nation water governance. Like, if you think about this, like, what's the first thing we do when we get up in the morning? We have a drink of water. We wash our hands with water. Now imagine over 7 billion people doing that the world over. You know, that's how sacred that water is. Over 7 billion people rely on it. Okay. Okay, and that was the last point, I guess. So I thank you so much for your attention. I'm very, very appreciative of the interest that's been shown in my presentation. And I can open it up to questions. Shirley, if you could moderate that.
Thank you so much, Miigwech. We have a person who stepped forward so far. Warwick, would you unmute and ask your questions?
Sure. Hi, Stewart. Thanks for the presentation. It's been very interesting to listen to and to gain your perspective. I have two questions. First, what are the main source water quality concerns for Goss Lake? Is it the cistern side, or is it the source water itself, where it's coming from before it goes to the cistern?
I think the source water, like I said, it's a pristine lake. It's a natural lake, but there's been climate change effects on it over the past probably a few decades. But at the treatment plant, if you took that water, a sample of that water, and it's monitored every day, it's okay. But by the time it's delivered to the truck, and then delivered it through that hose into the cisterns and then into the piping in the house, that somewhere along that line, there's contamination happening, and that is tied to the funding that's available to maintain that water system, the funding that's provided by Canada, which is at an 80% level. I mentioned that during the presentation. So all these factors are interconnected. So yes, it's during the transport of the water from the truck to the cisterns. That's where the main problem exists. And over 70% of the community is on cisterns.
Okay.
What was the other question?
Yeah, the second question is a little bit of a follow-up, but I don't know how important it will be then, given that the lake does have good water quality. But I'll ask it anyway. How does the community address water governance when water goes beyond the extent of traditional territory? So how do you engage with other communities nearby for sort of the interconnected waterways?
I think right now that's done on an informal ad hoc basis through our traditional relationships. Like if you look at the trapline block, that was drawn out by the elders in consultation with Oxford House, Shematawa, and Island Lake. The elders of the day got together. And I think those understandings still exist, that those boundaries are to be respected, those strapline boundaries, because they were established long ago in the 1940s by our elders, our forefathers. And if you look at that canoe quest route, it crosses Oxford House into Norrie House territory. And during that quest, when I was there, I was asked by my quest partners, they asked me, can you look into protecting this route? Which I did. And what I did was I looked into Indigenous-led protected areas. And we had a workshop up in Thompson, where I invited all the communities, including York Factory, Norrie House, to come in together. And I brought in experts from British Columbia. But in the end, at the end of the day, our recommendation to make that our whole area into an Indigenous-led protected area was rejected by our leadership at the time. But that what I've done to date now is I've kind of shrunk that area, so it encompasses the immediate area of our community. And I'm having that. I've proposed that be put into our land use plan. So there is a lot of interconnectedness, especially now with technology. Like I'm hearing that there's sauger now in Island Lake, and they're seeing another southern fish species through the haze system at Oxford House, including ours. Like there's southern species starting to move forward. I never saw pelicans in my time. Now there's lots of them. There's southern species, and that's the effects of climate change, global warming, or climate change anyway. These southern species, there's lots of snakes now. All of these species I never saw when I was growing up, but they're there now.
So we have next Brenda Baer, then Michelle Shepard, Pepper, and Florin. And just let me know, and Merle. So we have a lineup of 5 people asking questions next. Brenda?
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Brenda Baer, and I'm from the Peguis First Nation in Manitoba. I'm residing in Winnipeg. I work with the Assembly of First Nations, Ottawa, Manitoba region. I guess I'm just gathering some of the information. You know, I sit on the ACE committee throughout Canada. So we have meetings, and I want to work with you, Stewart, in terms of a number of issues. I wish we would have spoke before last week. The committee is an advisory committee on climate action and environment. It's an ACE committee at the AFN in Ottawa. So there's a number of us that sit on it, and it's targeted for the climate and environment related issues, including, you know, water, everything in terms of an Aboriginal traditional knowledge. There's also a subcommittee, and then there's Indigenous Advisory Committee. And there's a national, of course, you know, the National Climate Strategy. So I think, I mean, I won't take too much time. I've got to go on to another Zoom, but, you know, if I can get your email and follow up with a number of things, and we can have a discussion.
Okay.
And I would like to invite you to a Zoom with our committee. I know that last year we were with Regional Chief Kluani Adamek, and that's where we had her community of the Yukon. The regional chief had the climate action, so it was huge. I don't know if you went, Stewart. I did see MKO.
Oh,
yes. I did see. Yeah. Okay. So we didn't have a chance to meet, but I went up and on our team, Manitoba was Dr. Betty Linkslake. So yeah, we'll have more of a conversation. I don't want to take up anybody's time for question, but
okay.
If you can send me or inbox on here your address, or I just contact you at MKO.
Yes, you can find me at MKO. Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
And I'll put your email in the box if that's okay, Stewart.
Okay.
And Michelle, did you have a question? Thanks. You're on mute, Michelle. Do you want me to read your question? Okay. So I remember it's up here.
Oh, I'm okay now.
Okay.
Stewart and everybody there. I'm Michelle Shepard here, regulatory specialist with Grand Council Treaty 3. We work quite a bit with a resource law in Treaty 3 called Manitou Sakahigan. And we've been working towards a formalized process, and it's really been helpful for us to engage with whether it be proponents or government or different agencies to really put our position forward and have a stronger voice on the land. What's difficult is that it's sacred law. And so you take sacred law and putting it in writing is contrary to cultural norms. So it's that balance we're really working with, and we work hard to find a good balance with. So my question to you, Stewart, is do you have a formalized process for your natural law?
At this point in time, we don't have a formal write-up of the law. Mm-hmm. I think our laws are very much oral still.
Yes, sir.
You know, it's like we have certain understandings that we have at the community level, and they haven't really been, you know, codified, or it can be done, but it's going to take a lot of work.
It does.
But in terms of having any documents or written out, my dissertation is probably the first attempt to assert this notion of self-government over water. This is probably the first attempt specific to my community.
I commend you on your work,
Michelle. So it will be available soon, and I really recommend everyone reads it. It's a beautiful writing, and should be a book soon. So Pepper, are you next?
Yeah, thanks, Shirley. Hi, Stuart.
Hi,
Wonderful
Pepper.
presentation. It's just been so wonderful to watch your research unfold over these years. And I'm sure, like, when you come to the end of it, it's hard to, reflect back because you work so hard. But I'm just wondering if you've had a chance to do any thinking about what is required in terms of next steps to be able to implement that model that you've created. Do you have like a list of resources what it would take, or what the next steps would be to try to help move things forward?
To this point in time, like if you look at the colonial system that's been governing us, like if you look at that, starting from, if you look at my timeline, from the 1960s onwards, that's when we started really asserting our rights. And if you look at that evolution from that 1960s onwards to today, that's the colonial system. Like that's how many decades, right? That's why I'm saying that, it's not really feasible or to wait for that colonial system. How many more decades are we going to wait to even codify our sacred laws and our laws? We're going to have to come up with something else. One of the ideas I've had recently is, with the class water action suit, the class water lawsuit across Canada and here in Manitoba that's being launched right now. One of the ideas I've had is this is a great opportunity to approach Canada and say, come to the table and negotiate a self-governing model for us at MKO to take over our own water systems. And if Canada doesn't want to come to the table, what's preventing us as governments to apply for foreign aid from other countries? Nothing. Like we can approach the European Union. We already have a relationship with some of the countries. In I guess the big question here is the resourcing and the power that's going to be needed. And we can continue to struggle along under the colonial system, but we can't be bound by it. We need to decolonize our minds. Government is not the end all of everything. We have power within us as nations and as people to accomplish certain things. And we have to start thinking like that. And in terms of next steps, I think we should keep pushing what we can under the colonial system, but also we need to have this overriding objective of becoming self-governing, governing over our water, right?
Thank you so much.
Next is Linda Larcombe, and then Lisa Stevenson, and then we'll go to Flaren and Ute, and we'll probably have to close after that. And there is a demand for your presentation, Stewart, and we'll let you know that it will be on the Manitoba Madison website. We have a recording of this, but if we can also have the PowerPoint, we'll save it as a PDF and make it available, if that's okay, Stewart?
Yep.
Great. Okay, Linda?
Hi, Stewart. Thank you for the presentation. It was absolutely wonderful, and your work that you're doing is really fascinating and important work. And one of the things that I'm thinking of in terms of next steps or continued steps is what your thoughts are about sort of turning the tables on resource extraction companies to have them actually fund the implementation and the governance of your water model, and that might extend off of the water onto the land as well. So turning the tables and making sure that these resource extraction companies are contributing to the communities, and maybe that's in their impact benefit agreements that the communities have with these extraction companies. I'm just wondering what your thinking about that is, and if you see that as a possibility for funding of your model and the implementation of that.
Yeah, in the past, in my work experience, we've done many projects where we've managed to leverage funding from companies such as Manitoba Hydro, mining companies. That's certainly possible, and I think there's a great opportunity there because these resource companies. The way I kind of look at it is they only have legislative rights from the provincial government to do whatever they need to do. But us, we have constitutional rights to that land. And basically, like let's say, for example, mining, there's a bio layer over the earth. And what they're trying to do is they're trying to come through that bio layer that we have Aboriginal rights to and dig into the ground to access minerals. Well, that could be one of the conditions. And also, I've heard of a lot of criticisms of impact benefit agreements, but I think that's one of the avenues. But also, when I think of research, whenever I do research for First Nations, I think about it in terms of an overall governance. My research is eventually going to become part of that governance of that community, and it's very important for us to come at it from a point, I guess, a standpoint of autonomy. As a self-governing entity that are able to enter into contracts and that. So certainly, yes, I think any source is a very good opportunity to advance our model.
Right, exactly. Thank you very much, Stewart.
Okay.
Thanks. And Lisa Stevenson? Let's see.
There we go. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. Hello. Thank you very much for that presentation. I am getting my breadth and teachable requirements back at the University of Manitoba. I received my BA in 2005, I believe. So I'm in the geography class right now and also environmental science. I guess the environmental science class, which I'm really passionate about. My professor, Dr. McCants, gave me the link to this Zoom meeting, the Zoom presentation or webinar. And I'm very glad that I was able to catch this because it fits in well with my paper that I'm doing for my geography class. So I just have a few questions here. Like in Peguis, I know with Canada and all of its promises about clean drinking water and how many years they've been promising, when are they going to pull through? I'm just curious, how many water testing employees does God's Lake have?
Right now, we depend upon Health Canada for that. Like, okay. We don't have a community-based testing system right now.
Okay.
Yeah.
So then there's a Health Canada employee there all the time, or?
It's under the First Nation. Yeah, they have an employee that works with the Health Canada. I think they're called environmental health officers.
Oh yes, right.
Yeah.
So is it just the one officer, or?
Yeah, just one officer in the community, and then they work with the EHO at Health Canada.
Oh yes, Peguis has that too, but I think they only come in once in a while, and we do have, and same as God's Lake, the EFO and the AHO come in once in a while. Yeah,
same system. That's what I mean, like that we're governed by the same governance system, like the same Internet system.
Right. So, and yeah, we have the one guy, he's a local guy, and throughout the years, it's always just been one water testing person. And along the things with the water quality, quantity, and then the skin conditions, and then the mold, and we can get into all that.
Yeah.
And then Peguis, we also live south of Marble Ridge. Peguis, we're 205 feet below Fisher Branch and all of the municipalities to the south. And Marble Ridge, they had a manure spill back in 2003, and all of that pig manure came up the river, and then it goes out to Fisher River, Fisher Bay, and then onto Lake Winnipeg. Since that spill, I don't know, or people have been talking about blue babies, and I'm just wondering, with Manitoba Hydro and all of its disturbances with the northern communities like Goss Lake and Norrie House, I have family from Norrie House as well. My mom's from there. My Muslim was Tommy York, so I have the Yorks are my family in Norrie House. So I'm wondering, has God's Lake ever, spoken, or has elders or have the people spoken about blue babies?
Not that I've heard of, no.
Okay. And then lastly, sorry to take up so much of your time, but Peguis, they started a water diversion system last year where they're going around to each household and asking the people if they want this water diversion system where they divert the gray water, say like from the washing machines. So yeah, instead of going into the septic tank, it goes straight into the septic field. And then we have artesian wells. So with my paper, I want to tie that in, like that's going straight into the ground, compromising our water even more, our drinking water. And I guess we'll just have to wait to see what happens with that. And now INAC thought this was a miraculous idea, and they're doing this on all these other First Nations to save money. I'm just wondering, has God's Lake started these diversion systems as well, or what do they do?
Right now, like I said, it's God's Lake is a pretty natural system. It's a pretty natural lake, so there's been no need for any of these diversion projects that you see in the south, where it's more, I guess, densely populated.
Right.
Yeah, so our lake is pretty well in good shape still.
Well, our river is pretty bad. Yeah. Okay.
Thank you, Lisa.
Yeah, thank you very much for that.
That's excellent information and scary. So blue baby syndrome is connected with nitrate poisoning, and in an agricultural area, that's a real concern. So thanks for bringing that up, and let something really has to be done if that's a concern.
Okay, thank you.
And Florin, and then Uche and Thomas, I believe, and then we'll draw this to a close.
Okay.
Hi everyone. My name is Florin Sholademi. I currently work as a research assistant at the University of Manitoba with Dr. Mike Ballard, and I intend to start my PhD in January 2021 at the Natural Resources Institute under the supervision of Dr. Thompson and Dr. Ballard. Firstly, Stewart, I want to congratulate you for the giant stride you have taken with your dissertation. I never knew you have been working on water project for your PhD. I've been seeing you around for the past 3 years that I've been at the NRI, but recently I came across your project, and I will equally be working on water and fish with Indigenous communities in Northern Manitoba and Ontario. So focusing on water quality and impact of mining projects and how it affects Indigenous treaties and Aboriginal rights. So my question is that I saw your first slide and you went over like historical linear model that shows what happened over the years. So I want to ask if your research actually explored waterborne diseases outbreak in God's Lake And if you equally looked at indigenous research methods for water quality monitoring program.
Yeah, that was actually okay. Yeah, that was actually my initial intention for my dissertation was to do source water protection planning for the whole that dropline block that I showed you. But at the time, or what I realized later on was that it's very narrow in scope. And when you have, like I told you about that aski, our word for earth is aski, and it encompasses everything, including water, air, and it's a holistic thing. And that's how we think. You know, when if you go into a community, a First Nation community, you're going to get a lot of questions about, and let's say your workshop is on water. You're not only going to be getting questions about water, you're going to get questions about housing, you're going to get questions about health, you're going to get questions about education, you're going to get all kinds of questions. And that's the indigenous mind, I call it. In terms of monitoring, right now, like I said, there's no major industrial developments close by. There's only one from the 1930s and 40s. And right now, I would say that our lake is in pretty well self-monitoring. Our people know what's going on out there because they're out there every year, you know, moose hunting, fishing, trapping, you know, they're out on the land. Even though trapping is not as prevalent as it was, or as heavy as it was back then, I've had elders come up to me and say, you know, don't let anybody take our lands. Don't let anybody take our trap lines, because that's where our life came from. That's what enabled us to survive. Basically, the life comes from the land. And that's what they said. And we haven't abandoned those areas, they said. But I'll give you an example of monitoring, okay? Like community-based monitoring. Several years ago, a hunter approached me and he said, towards the southwest of our community there, it's called the Swapaswan Lake and Touchwood Lake. He said, we went moose hunting there in the fall and we noticed the water was rising. And we were wondering, like in the fall, the water's supposed to be dropping, right? Yet they saw this water rising on that Touchwood Lake. And they were wondering why. And the water that rushes into God's Lake through Wasatchuwan River, I guess you couldn't even see the rapids because the water was that high. It was just tumbling down into God's Lake. And he said it wasn't until later that I heard that they shut down the Chenpeg Dam on the Nelson River completely, so they can work on the turbines. So all that water that backed up behind Chenpeg, it forced water right into God's Lake, over 200 kilometers away. So in terms of monitoring, I mean, what better monitoring system is there? We need to just to formalize that. Those observations that are brought back by our hunters and our fishermen and our people, they're always on the land and they notice these changes. I'm just giving you an example of that, you know, and that's traditional knowledge in action, that observation. I don't know if that answers your question, but there is information. It's just oral. Yeah.
Yes, sure. Thank you very much.
Okay.
Thank you. And Uche and Camillo, I think, Thomas and then Camillo, and then absolute cut. We have to leave. It's so good though. We're really enjoying all your stories and your knowledge.
Thank you so much, Stewart, for your cool and calmness and for the wonderful presentation that you made. And So mine is a little bit of dilemma and maybe challenge or confusion, and not like a question, but maybe I'm posing it to all of us, so to say, but maybe you can also throw in based on your experience. And thank you for the answer to the last question. It was fabulous about Indigenous knowledge and monitoring and evaluation, how they observe and all that. So fantastic. I'm just wondering, is there other ways that we can take this message to get this, this issue, because I find it really challenging and problematic and dilemmatcal that Indigenous people cannot enjoy the rich resources in their ancestral land, something that they have been taking care of thousands of years, like you mentioned. They enjoy their way of life and everything, how they do it. And all of a sudden, the whole thing is just stopped, and then a different system altogether. And now we have people, I mean, like here, I live in Winnipeg, for instance, so we have tap water running. I got a plumber came around today to fix the tap and all that water still restored running. And then people who have those resources, water is taken from their land, and then other people are enjoying it. So I'm just wondering, are there other ways that we can make this message out so that people can know what's going on? I'm really grateful for getting, for Shelley Thompson inviting me for this. So it's opening my eyes a lot. And the other time, I had to tell my kids that there are people here in Canada who do not have access to good drinking water, and they were surprised to hear that. So maybe we can also get this out in among the youth in the schools to let Canadians, younger people, know that as fellow Canadians who don't have access to drinking water. I can understand in developing countries where colonization and independence, and then the local people are now ruling, denying their people access to the resources. But here in Canada government also promote good governance in other countries, but yet Indigenous people don't get to enjoy the resources in their land. So I kind of find it a little bit hypocritical. So that's why I said it's a little bit dilemmatable and at the same time a challenge. Is there other way that we can promote this message to let people more, maybe through schools and workshop and all that, more of action to get these messages out?
Okay, yeah. One of the things that I've had in my experience is, community consultation. And I worked as a community coordinator for consulting under self-government. And I'll just use my community as an example. It's very tough to get people interested in, because they're busy worrying about their bread and butter issues in the, putting food on the table. That's how our things are in our communities. But one of the things I learned in my experience there is that you need to develop a multi-pronged approach to let people know, or to educate people, to make people aware. You need a multi-pronged approach. You need several avenues where you can teach, where you can pass this information on. In this case right now, we have the Class Water Action suit happening in Manitoba. We have the National Water Class Action lawsuit happening. We have, Brenda Baer just mentioned all the committees that are under the Assembly of First Nations. We have organizations such as MKO, SCO, and then we have also educational organizations such as Manitoba First Nations Education Resource Center. They can certainly play a role in terms of getting this information into the schools. And then, of course, we can also engage in the province and federal governments to develop programs for, actually, I think they are required now to do that under the TRC recommendations, the Truth and Reconciliation Commission. I think they are required, or as part of reconciliation, they have to try and make an attempt to put this information into their elementary schools and their junior high schools. So that would be my answer, is that, we need to push for multi-level, multi-directional information campaigns into all avenues that are available to us. And we need our political leaders to push that. You can only go so far on a technical level. I've learned that in my career. There comes a point where you're going to hit a brick wall. And that's where you bring in your political leaders and say, here, I can't go any further. You take it. You push it with the prime minister. You push it with the premier. And then it'll come back down through the bureaucrats into you again. And then you can keep going again. You know, that's how my experience has been. So I think that we need multi avenues to do that, what you're suggesting.
Excellent. And final question is, and Camilo, I believe his speaker isn't working, so I'll just speak it for him, is regarding wastewater treatment. Are there reservoirs? What is the treatment? You know, kind of the technical aspect, but maybe the source water protection too, because if wastewater gets into the lake, then it also, you know, has in other communities gotten into the water system. So
Yeah.
maybe speaking to that.
Okay, wastewater is actually very important in source water protection planning. That's what I looked at when I began my dissertation research. And the three processes that I researched was the expert-driven source water protection plan, and that's in Ontario because of the high density population and because of what happened at Walkerton in 2000. So they have that expert-driven process, source water protection. The other one that's been developed by the University of Saskatchewan was by Dr. Bob Patrick, and he developed a template for Indian affairs for use by First Nations. And then there's that one, but we can always modify it to suit our communities. And then there's another simple one that's it's kind of a simple health framework, and that's by the World Health Organization. So we can either use that one that's very simple and straightforward for, let's say, non-threatened communities such as, let's say, Goss Lake. But then we can always upgrade it into, let's say, the Indigenous Services Canada system. That is more in between the expert-driven one and the World Health Organization one. That's very simple. I think the Indigenous Services Canada one is kind of probably the best one to use. And in terms of source water protection planning, it's probably one of the best avenues. Like there's a multi-barrier approach that's accepted and recognized internationally, and we can use that system. Again, it's always about resources. We can develop these, we can do these, but it's always about resources. Especially during this pandemic, all the resources are stretched to the limit. You know, and we need to start convincing governments that our communities are not what you develop in Ottawa. Your formulas don't reflect the realities of our communities. You need to start listening to us as peoples. You need to start listening to what we're telling you. We know what's best for us. And these governments need to start listening, you know, in order to realize some of the stuff that all us good people, I guess, that are demanding and developing these things, right? So, and it's so good that there's so much interest in this webinar. It's, we need that support. We need that government needs to hear this, and I think they will eventually. Okay, thank you.
Thank you, everyone, for participating, and we'll wish everyone well and good health. Take care and happy holidays. Bye.
Okay, thank you. Thank you very much.